Welcome to the deep dive. So you, the learner, you're looking for that quick but really solid understanding, right? Those moments where it just clicks, but without getting totally swamped by info.
Exactly. Just the good stuff.
Right. So today we're jumping right into Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck, and we're aiming to cut through the usual self-help chatter.
Yeah, get to the surprising bits, the stuff you can actually use.
Totally. From that whole don't try thing, which sounds weird at first, to figuring out what actually, deserves your energy.
Mm-hmm.
When I first saw that title, honestly, my brain immediately went, Charles Bukowski. You know, the writer. Gritty, raw.
Yeah, I can see that connection.
And it turns out that wasn't far off, which kind of told me, okay, this is going to be different. So where does this whole counterintuitive thing actually start?
Well, it really kicks off with Bukowski, like you said.
Which year?
Which is funny, because he's not your typical self-help guru. Right?
Not at all.
Alcoholic, gambler, kind of a mess by his own admission. But Manson uses him to make this really key point. Bukowski spent, decades basically failing in most people's eyes.
That post office job.
Yeah, that dead-end job. Then, bam, success at 50 with his novel Post Office. And get this, the dedication. Dedicated to nobody.
Yeah, wow. That's blunt.
It's like he's embracing being insignificant almost defiantly.
Right. And then the final kicker, on his tombstone, it just says, don't try.
Which makes you stop and think, shouldn't it be never give up or something?
Exactly. But Manson's take is that Bukowski's success wasn't about, striving for some perfect win. It was about being brutally honest about who he was, flaws and all.
Accepting the loser label almost.
Yeah.
And writing from that place.
Yeah. He wasn't trying to be someone else. And this is where it gets really relevant today, I think. It just completely clashes with that pressure we all feel.
Oh, the social media pressure.
Yeah. They always look happy, successful, got it all together.
Right. It's relentless. And Manson calls that the feedback loop from hell.
Okay, explain that.
It's like you see all these perfect lives online, you feel bad because your life isn't like that. Then you feel bad about feeling bad. Then maybe anxious about feeling anxious.
Yeah, it just spirals.
It's a total cycle. And that's where not giving a feck comes in. It's not about being indifferent or, nihilistic.
Right, it's not apathy.
No. The core idea is accepting that life is messy, the world's flawed, suffering happens. And then consciously deciding where to put your limited energy, what actually matters based on your values.
Because, let's face it, Manson puts it bluntly, you're gonna die one day.
Stark, but true.
And it really brings home that we only have so much time, so many, flick spores to give, as he puts it. You can't care about everything.
You just spread yourself too thin.
So not caring about every little annoyance isn't being cold. It's about saving your focus for the big stuff. He uses that example, remember the coupon lady?
Oh yeah, freaking out over a few cents at the grocery store.
And the insight there, maybe, is that the anger isn't really about the coupons. It's maybe coming from something deeper, like loneliness or feeling like her life lacks purpose. She has nothing better to care about.
Exactly. Which leads Manson to this idea of practical enlightenment.
Okay, practical enlightenment sounds less floaty than regular enlightenment.
Yeah, it's grounded. It's basically just getting comfortable with the fact that suffering, failure, loss, regret, death itself, it's all unavoidable. It's part of the deal.
So instead of fighting it constantly,
you accept it.
Yeah.
And that acceptance actually builds resilience. He even brings in the Buddha story.
The prince who was sheltered from all suffering.
Right. He tried to escape it, but realized you can't. His big insight was that suffering without meaning is pointless. The key is accepting pain and loss are just part of being human.
And then there's disappointment, Panda.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor.
It's the core idea there, that being dissatisfied is somehow good.
Kind of, yeah. Biologically useful anyway. Manson's point is that our constant feeling that things could be better, that slight dissatisfaction, it's actually what drives progress. It makes us innovate, change things.
So it's not a bug, it's a feature.
Exactly. It is the system. Pain, physical or emotional, it's feedback.
It's like stubbing your toe.
Precisely. Hurts like hell, but you learn really quick not to walk into that table leg again.
Okay, makes sense.
And emotional pain, sadness, anger, anxiety, it's doing the same job, signaling a problem, pushing you to act. Manson says negative emotions are a call to action.
And positive emotions are the reward.
Right, for doing something beneficial. But, and this is crucial, emotions are just signals. They aren't commandments. Meaning, just because something feels good doesn't mean it is good for you long term.
Yeah.
And feeling bad doesn't automatically mean something is wrong. You got to question the feelings themselves.
Okay, so don't just blindly follow your feelings. Which kind of ties into the whole happiness thing, right? The hedonic treadmill.
Exactly that. You strive for the next thing, the promotion, the bigger house, whatever.
You get it, feel good for a bit.
And then you just adapt. You're back to your baseline happiness level. You need another hit just to feel okay again.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
And Manson points out this interesting trade-off. Things that bring pleasure often have a built-in potential for pain.
Like what?
Well, marriage brings love, but also conflict, right? A great job brings fulfillment, but maybe tons of stress. You gain something, but there's also something you could lose.
Risk and reward are tied together.
Pretty much. He tells that story about himself, fantasizing about being a rock star.
Yeah, the crowds, the adoration.
But realizing he had zero interest in the actual work.
Right.
The endless practice, hauling gear, the boring stuff. He wanted the result, not the process.
Oh, I relate to that. Wanting the shiny outcome without the grind.
Totally. And he contrasts that with Jimmy, the startup guy who's all talk, super high self-esteem, but achieves nothing.
Right, coasting on delusion.
And the insight there is the danger of feeling good without actually doing anything to earn it, which ties into entitlement.
Ah, entitlement. Manson talks about that a lot.
Yeah, he argues it's like this self-feeding loop.
Yeah.
If something good happens, it's because you're awesome. If something bad happens...
No one else's fault. Never yours.
Exactly. It warps your view of reality. It stops you from actually learning or growing.
And weirdly, he says even having problems you can't solve can feed into it. How does that work?
Well, the thinking goes something like, my problems are so unique, so unsolvable that I must be special. Either uniquely gifted or uniquely screwed up. Either way, special.
Huh. That's a strange twist.
He mentions feeling that way himself in relationships when he was younger, needing constant validation. And he also points out how our modern world, with social media showing only the extremes,
Makes us feel inadequate.
yeah, or like we deserve those extreme highs, leading to more entitlement.
Which loops back to that big question. Okay, if I'm probably not going to be some extraordinary genius or superstar, then what's the point?
And Manson tackles that head on. He challenges that whole idea that everyone is destined for greatness.
Because if everyone is special,
Then nobody is,
Right.
right? It's a paradox. And this pressure to be exceptional can actually be harmful. People might even seek negative attention, like playing the victim, just to feel special.
so what's the alternative then?
This is where it shifts. It's about consciously choosing your own values, your own metrics for success.
Okay, taking control of the measuring stick.
Exactly. He tells that incredible story about Hiro Onoda.
The Japanese soldier who kept fighting World War II for like 30 years after it ended.
Yeah, because his value was absolute loyalty to his orders, even when they were obsolete. And then there's the guy who found him, Norio Suzuki, who was equally obsessed with finding Onoda, a panda, and the Yeti.
Wow. Talk about dedication to potentially pointless quests.
Right. The insight is how easy it is to dedicate yourself completely to something that might not actually matter,
Yeah.
just because you believe in it so strongly.
So how do you figure out if your quests do matter?
Manson suggests this technique. If something keeps bothering you, keep asking yourself why. Dig deeper and deeper until you uncover the underlying value and the metric you're using to judge the situation.
Like his example with his brother not calling enough.
Exactly. He realized his metric was frequency of contact, but his deeper value was actually mutual respect and trust when he shifted his metric to align with the value.
The problem kind of dissolved. He saw it differently.
Precisely. The key insight. The meaning isn't in the problem. It's in how you frame it, how you measure it.
It reminds me of the Dave Mustaine story.
Oh, from Megadeth. Still bitter about getting kicked out of Metallica after all those years.
Yeah, because his metric for success was always external, uncontrollable. Be bigger than Metallica. Despite his own huge success, that metric guaranteed he'd always feel like he came up short.
Such a powerful example of a bad metric. Contrast that with Pete Best.
The original Beatles drummer. Got fired right before they hit it huge. Rough deal.
Incredibly rough. But Manson points out that Best eventually found happiness. How? By changing his values and metrics. He decided family and a stable life were more important than fame.
He redefined success for himself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which leads to Manson defining good versus bad values. Good values are based in reality, they help society, or at least don't hurt it, and they're things you can actually control right now.
Like honesty,
Yeah.
creativity.
Yeah. Bad values are often based on superstition or fantasy. They might be destructive, and crucially, they depend on external things you can't control.
Like being liked by everyone or just getting rich for the sake of it.
Perfect examples. So self-improvement in this view isn't about chasing some vague happiness. It's about choosing better values, things that are more worthwhile to care about.
I mean, you care about better things.
You get better problems and a better life, paradoxically. Think about the marathon runner. The physical pain is real. But because they chose to run, that pain feels like accomplishment, like power. If that same pain was forced on them, it'd be misery. The difference is choice, agency, responsibility.
Okay, responsibility. That's a big one for Manson. He flips that old Spider-Man line right
Yeah. Instead of, with great power comes great responsibility, he says. With great responsibility comes great power.
there.
The insight is that taking ownership of your problems, even the ones that aren't your fault, is the first essential step to actually solving them. It gives you power back.
He makes a clear distinction between fault and responsibility, doesn't he?
Crucial distinction. Fault is about the past, who caused it. Responsibility is about the present. What choices are you making now?
Like the baby left on your doorstep example.
Exactly. It's not your fault the baby is there, but now you're responsible for what happens next.
Or the judge in court. Didn't commit a crime, but responsible for justice.
We're constantly responsible for things that aren't our fault. Manson talks about his own breakup.
Blaming his ex at first.
Yeah, for his misery. But the shift happened when he realized he was responsible for his own happiness, his own reactions. That's what led him to actually improve things.
It's empowering in a way. Even with really tough stuff, like he mentions Malala.
Incredible example of taking responsibility in the face of unimaginable adversity.
Or that reader who lost his son. Manson wasn't saying don't feel pain.
Not at all. It was about acknowledging that even in grief, you are still responsible for your own emotions, how you choose to process that immense pain.
So responsibility gives you agency, which leads to, well, what can we actually control? Genetics, circumstances. How does choice fit in?
Yeah, that's where he brings in that BBC documentary about teenagers with OCD.
Right, they didn't choose to have OCD.
Absolutely not. But the empowering part was seeing they could choose how to respond. They could shift their values, do the hard work of desensitization therapy. They took responsibility for managing it.
It's like his poker analogy.
Exactly. You don't choose the hand you're dealt, your genetics, your upbringing, whatever. But how you play that hand over the long run, that's down to your choices.
And he warns against getting stuck in, like victimhood chic.
Yeah, that feeling of being perpetually offended. It can become addictive, but it stops you from taking responsibility and actually changing things.
So change boils down to just choosing to care about something different.
Fundamentally, yes. Though he stresses it's simple, but not easy. It involves discomfort, facing things you might rather avoid, and accepting that our beliefs are probably wrong a lot of the time.
We're constantly revising our understanding.
Growth is that revision process, chipping away at our own errors. He mentions that button-pushing experiment.
Where people invent reasons for random rewards.
Yeah, shows how easily our brains create meaning, even where there isn't any. And the story about Meredith Marin's false memory of abuse.
How our existing beliefs can shape or even create our memories.
It's a sobering reminder of how unreliable our own minds can be, which is why he cautions so strongly against absolute certainty.
Like Erin, the woman obsessed with curing death.
Extreme example, yeah. So certain about her goal, but her actual life and values were totally dysfunctional. It shows how certainty, even about a good goal, can be dangerous.
And that research on evil, it's not low self-esteem, but often extreme certainty.
Baumeister's research, yeah. People often do terrible things because they are absolutely convinced they are right. Certainty closes you off. Uncertainty, on the other hand,
Opens you up to learning, growth, empathy.
exactly. It makes you less judgmental of yourself and others, which is why Manson proposes that crucial question to ask yourself.
What if I'm wrong?
Yeah, simple but powerful. He tells that story about his friend's brother tearing down her engagement.
Because he was so certain he knew best.
Right, based on his own baggage. The harder, better path is often humility, trusting others, accepting you don't have all the answers. Manson even found value in his own early failure.
Feeling like he had nothing to lose so he could try stuff like blogging.
Exactly. That lack of pressure gave him freedom, which leads to the failure-success paradox.
Okay, what's that?
The idea that real, meaningful success often comes indirectly. Not from chasing fame or money, but from focusing on a humble, process-based value, like Picasso just aiming for honest expression. The success follows the authentic effort.
And even trauma can be a catalyst. The WWII Survivor Study,
Bukowski's work, showed that intense fear, anxiety, existential crises, while awful, can sometimes force major psychological growth. Shake up your whole perspective.
like his own childhood fear, the VCR question.
How do you just walk up and talk to a person? It shows how our emotions can build these walls that seem totally real, defining our reality until we challenge them.
Which brings us to the do something principle.
Yes. Simple but effective. Came from his early days trying to build his business.
Just do something, anything.
Pretty much. The idea is don't wait for motivation or inspiration. They often follow action, not the other way around.
Okay.
Feeling stuck. Just start doing something related to where you want to go.
And it makes failure less scary.
Yeah, because the metric for success just becomes, did I do something? Not, did it work perfectly? It builds momentum. Even if you're having an existential crisis about your values, just start acting in line with a value you think might be better. The feeling might follow the action.
Okay, action leads. Now shifting gears again. Saying no, boundaries, trust, big topics.
Huge. He talks about his digital nomad phase.
Trying to see and do everything.
Yeah, and realizing it was all surface level, no depth. The turning point was in Russia, St. Petersburg.
What happened there?
The communication style was just blunt, very direct. Lots of rejection, but it wasn't personal.
Yeah.
And he found it incredibly liberating.
Liberation through rejection. That sounds Manson-esque.
Totally. His insight was that to truly value something, a place, a person, a career, you have to reject the alternatives. You have to commit. Breadth is shallow. Depth requires choosing.
Which applies to relationships too. He takes down Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah. Argues it's not romantic, it's toxic. Codependent. No boundaries. Unhealthy love, he says, is about two people trying to escape their problems using each other.
Versus healthy love.
Where two individuals support each other while taking responsibility for their own stuff.
Yeah.
Addressing problems together, but not trying to fix each other's problems for them.
Because that doesn't work.
Never does. He talks about entitled people either dumping their problems on others or taking too much responsibility for others' problems.
Both ways to avoid their own issues.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that victim-saver dynamic in relationships. Both are getting an unhealthy emotional payoff.
So healthy relationships need strong boundaries.
Absolutely. Which means not being afraid of conflict sometimes. Understanding you can't control how others feel and focusing on your own growth and responsibilities within the relationship.
And trust. How does that fit in?
Trust requires the ability and willingness for both people to say and hear no. Conflict handled well actually builds trust because it shows who's really there for you unconditionally.
What about when trust is broken? Can it be rebuilt?
Manson says yes, but it requires real work. The person who broke trust has to own up to their flawed values that led to the breach and then demonstrate consistently over time that they've changed. Actions, not just words.
And commitment ties into this. Avoiding it keeps options open.
But prevents the real rewards, the depth you get from investing in one relationship, one career path, one community. You miss out on the richness.
Okay, which brings us to the final chapter. Heavy title. And then you die.
Yeah, but it's surprisingly hopeful in a way. It's about finding meaning beyond just ourselves. He starts with that incredibly moving story about his friend Josh dying suddenly.
How that shook him out of his own head.
Totally. Shifted him from being inhibited and self-absorbed to feeling a sense of responsibility, curiosity about life. It was a wake-up call.
And this leads to Ernest Becker's ideas.
Right. Becker talked about immortality projects.
Our attempts to live on after we die.
Exactly. Creating a conceptual self that lasts. Through religion, politics, art, science, having kids, building a company, our values are our immortality projects. Becker argued that our fear of death is what drives us to give so many fish-ins to distract ourselves.
But then Becker had a change of heart.
Yeah, later in life, he realized the immortality projects themselves were often the problem. They lead to conflict, dogma, trying to force our meaning onto others. The real liberation, he thought, comes from becoming more comfortable with the reality of death.
Accepting our finiteness.
Yeah, because when you accept you're not going to live forever, you can choose your values more freely. You're not desperately trying to build some monument to yourself. You can focus on what matters now.
Manson's experience at the Cape of Good Hope, feeling small but alive.
A powerful image. Confronting mortality doesn't have to be depressing. It can be clarifying. It forces you to ask, what impact do I want to have? How will the world be different, maybe better, because I was here?
Death as a compass for our values.
Exactly. Without acknowledging it, trivial stuff takes over. But when you keep death in mind, it helps prioritize. And ultimately, he argues, true happiness comes from caring about something bigger than yourself.
Moving beyond our own ego.
Yeah, believing you're part of a larger story. Entitlement isolates you. Caring about something beyond yourself connects you. He ends, fittingly, with Bukowski again.
About life being a circus, getting lost in the small stuff.
Right, and reflect on Josh's death as that final lesson. Life is finite. Take responsibility. Make it count.
Wow. Okay, so pulling it all together from this deep dive into the subtle art, what are the big takeaways?
Well, I think it's realizing negativity isn't always bad. It can be useful. It's about consciously choosing what gets your limited energy your values. Taking responsibility even when it's not your fault, because that's where your power lies. Embracing uncertainty as a path to growth, and using the reality of death not as something to fear, but as a tool to focus on what truly matters.
Some seriously counterintuitive stuff, but it makes a lot of sense when you break it down. And that, the learner, was the goal, a shortcut to getting the core insights, those surprising angles, without getting bogged down.
Hopefully some aha moments in there.
Definitely. So maybe a final thought for you to chew on. Take a look at the facts you're currently giving. In the grand scheme of things, facing your own mortality, are they really the ones that count? Are they aligned with your deepest values? Something to reflect on.
What metrics are you using?
Great question. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.